You must remember that this is an EU-funded project, and the EU has a lot of stake in this as well. And to speak to us on that, we will be joined by the Deputy Ambassador of the European Union to Namibia. He's also the Head of Section in Human Rights Focal Point and the EU Liaison Officer on Human Rights Defenders. That's Mr. Ian Dupont. Sir, welcome. A round of applause for him as well, please.
Thank you. If you'd list all my job titles, we'll be here for the whole night, because in dwindling resources, we always have multiple hats. I'm not much for protocol, but I do want to recognize the presence here of the German Ambassador Hutter, the Director General of the Deutsche Welle, and the Namibian Ombudsman, if he is here with us today. Good to see you, sir. Also our colleagues of IPPR, LAC, NMT, thank you for being with us today. So it's a pleasure to join you here for the launch of the Eco Dialogue Collective. It's an initiative that fits within the EU's Global Gateway Strategy and the EU-Namibia Partnership on green hydrogen and critical raw materials, which we're implementing together with our member states as Team Europe. The EU's Global Gateway is not just about infrastructure and connectivity, but it's about supporting sustainable governance, responsible business, and meaningful community participation. We call it the 360 approach. CSOs and media are indispensable to democracy and sustainable development. They bridge societal divides, amplify marginalized voices, and provide critical oversight that fosters transparency and accountability. And that's really what we at the European Union value deeply. And we remain committed to supporting initiatives like this that strengthen civic engagement, human rights, and environmental justice. The EU and our member states are still the world's largest donor, full stop. It's something we don't say very often, but I think it's something we can be proud of. And in the current context of global developments, I think you'll agree it's important, specifically when it comes to civil society. Globally, we provide over 1.5 billion euro between 2021 and 2027 through our Instrument of Democracy and Human Rights. So collaborating with CSOs really and media is a key aspect of the EU's efforts across our programming and our policy initiatives. In Namibia, we will also soon launch a structured dialogue with CSO that will formalize this cooperation, and we really hope to see you all there as well. But today, we are launching the Eco Dialogue Collective, which will empower media and civil society to facilitate the informed public debate and policy dialogue that we need to accompany the transformational green industrialization that is taking place right now. Also, we need to accompany the sustainable extractive industry and oil and gas in line with international ESG standards, so that Namibia's abundant resources can really benefit all Namibians and not just the lucky few. So together with Germany, we want to strengthen Namibia's media landscape and civil society capabilities with this project. We have provided more than 750,000 euro together with Germany's contribution that will lead up to almost €1 million to deliver targeted training, foster inclusive community dialogues. So my sincere thanks goes out to all the partners, to Deutsche Welle Akademie, and the Namibian partners, Namibian Media Trusts, the Institute for Public Policy Research, and the Legal Assistance Center. So thank you very much for leading this initiative. Namibia's ambitious green industrialization and extractive industries offers significant economic promises for Namibia. However, there are challenges around governance, equity, sustainability, and environment. Addressing those challenges requires a vigilant, empowered, and informed civil society and media. So we want to encourage dialogue rather than division. And we don't shy away from critical voices. I've seen some of the Deutsche Welle content on green hydrogen myself, and let's have that debate. Let's speak up when we don't believe or when we want more information. But we encourage everyone to speak up in an informed manner, a structured manner, based on facts, not on rumors and disinformation. So on behalf of the EU, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your dedication, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the Eco Dialogue Collective will do for us in the next couple of years. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to call up my panelists to, I don't want to put them on the spot, to just have a conversation with them. We we're going from knowledge to solutions. And remember, I promised you two things in the beginning. You're either going to leave here more informed or more confused. But the aim is to get from knowledge to solutions. Let's hope we get there. And to help us do that, I do want to welcome on the stage Tangeni Amupadhi, who is the Managing Director and Editor of the Namibian. A round of applause for him, please. You can sit anywhere, Tangeni. Senzi Awases is the President of the Association of Women in Mining in Africa. A round of applause for her, please. We also have Ms. Eline van der Linden. She is the Head of Impact, Environmental and Social Governance at the Namibia Green Hydrogen Program. A round of applause for her. And then the Director General of Deutsche Welle, looking at this with a global journalism lens, is Peter Limbourg this evening. Thank you so much, Peter. As mentioned, we're going from knowledge to solutions, and why transparency is a key to Namibia's energy transition is the theme of our discussion here. And perhaps just before we go there, Hagen, I need you to do me a favor if you can. If we don't have transparency, especially with the issues of oil and gas and green energy, where do we go to as a country? I'd like one person to give me a brief answer, if possible, on the top of your mind. What happens if we don't have transparency in this space? Do I have to look at somebody to give a brief answer? But Mr. Nakuta, I'll look at you. I need a 30-second answer.
I would say then we are doomed, because it's a question of secrecy. It's a question of a lot of things would happen in the dark, and this is the kind of corruption that we are trying to address. That would be the order of the day if there's no transparency.
Thank you.
You asked me to think of my hand.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Nakuta. And those are the thoughts of ordinary Namibians. And as we start off our discussion, I also just do want to welcome Suzie Shefeni to the stage. Suzie, thanks a lot for joining us here. Suzie is a research associate at the Institute for Public Policy Research. And perhaps, Suzie, I'll start with you as you're here. Civil society usually champions, as Zoe mentioned, social justice, right? Link transparency to the issue of social justice, especially when you look at that video there with the feelings that Namibians have around the issue of this green revolution that we're going into.
Thank you very much, John Colin, and good evening to everyone here. The first thing that comes to mind in terms of social justice and transparency is the fact that when we're looking at emerging industries, these are new industries that come into the country in order to benefit the people as they're utilizing the resources. And the first thing that we consider when we look at that is, how is it going to benefit the people? And it benefits the people through these, obviously, like benefit agreements and the contracts. One of the things that we need to champion here, because it connects to social justice, is the transparency at the fundamental level, right? Because what we see now is a lot of community engagement projects that have come up, particularly in green hydrogen and in oil and gas, that come into the communities and tell you, okay, this is how you're going to benefit. These are the amount of jobs that are coming out of this. This is the anticipated growth in GDP. But this newfound transparency is built on a foundation that is honestly cracked. And that is because at the core, we do not have a culture of transparency. In green hydrogen, for example, we have been calling a civil society for the disclosure of... Hello? Okay, good. Yes, for the disclosure of the agreements that have been signed, for example, between Hyphen and the government. However, this has not been done. They have shared a summary. However, we believe that this is not enough. And it's not only in green hydrogen, it's in oil and gas as well. They do not disclose the agreements that have been signed between Total Energy, with Shell, with Gulf Energia, and the government. And we believe that transparency at this level is one of the most important, because it allows people to know what the government is going into and how the people can benefit from it, right? Because when it comes to natural resources, they are our assets as a country, and they are our assets for us to benefit from. And I think that's also why one thing that you'll always hear from the IPPR side is for Namibia to join the EITI, the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, which is a voluntary association that countries enter so that they can be part of this EITI, where they disclose agreements, and there are a number of disclosures that are incorporated in EITI: petroleum agreements, concession agreements, disclosing the involvement of politically connected individuals. All of this is so important, because under the veil of secrecy, corruption breeds and corruption flourishes. And under the veil of secrecy, we also do not know whether we are in mutually advantageous agreements. And that is the core of social justice, especially when it comes to new industries. We want the people to benefit from them, and it comes from that access to information. Disclosure is not a threat, it is a safeguard.
Thank you, Suzie. And perhaps on that last point regarding the issues of access to information, Tangeni, I'll turn to your side. The Namibian has, throughout the last couple of years, exposed gaps in, these energy and oil and gas negotiations that we've seen. Talk to us on what drives the energy reporting at the Namibian, but also how what the experience is, rather, in navigating getting that information in the face of government, in the face of the attached companies and the stakeholders.
Sure, good evening. What informs what we do is a basic appreciation that, at least I would argue, information is the most important aspect in life. Why do I say so? We can start anywhere. If we want food, we need to have some sort of information. If we want to learn, we need to have access to some sort of information. So we are then at platforms. We use certain platforms to provide that kind of information. So we then find it very important that journalists should, and I'm so glad with projects like this, journalists should be empowered, should be strengthened, should be trained to know what information to put out to the public. Journalists play the role, in my view, of the, should I say, the interpreter, the interlocutor between the experts, between the industries, between the jargons that we get pumped with to transmit that information. So that is really what informs what we do. What was the second part?
Talk to us about your experience when it comes to getting that information in the face of government and stakeholders.
Okay. I think Graham mentioned the issue of lack of legal process or instruments that are not in place. A law called the Access to Information was passed, was signed by President Geingob. To this day, the mechanism, the process, the office where an ordinary member of the public, forget journalists, an ordinary member of the public could go and request information that is in the public interest, has nowhere to go. And there is just no explanation why the government is not setting up the commission. What is it called? Information Commission. So journalists in Namibia then are left to literally beg for information or go underground to try and get, and I tell you, basic documents, basic information that ordinarily should be public. You will get sent from pillar to post. You'll get told, yes, I have the information here, but the ED has to be the one releasing it. And that should not be the case at all. And I think we want to get to a stage where the people who are entrusted with public office, the bureaucrats, the politicians who we have voted into power, start to understand that this is not their material. They were just given the key to the silo to distribute the material in an orderly fashion. So hopefully that's we will get to that kind of position.
Thanks for that, Tangeni, and Senzi, perhaps we'll go to you in that respect. There's been a lot of back and push around the idea of information, whether it's there or not, is the right information, is it not the right information. Businesses, in order to operate, need the information, and for a matter of fact, the right information. And that information has to go around policies and around the ideas of what is actually happening on the ground. Speak to us on how that affects the business climate, especially in an energy climate.
Yeah.
The lack of information or the existence of it, and whether it's right or not.
CJ, thanks. It's a good question, but I want to just bring it back home to what we've been discussing the whole night about transparency, etc., and not just just the energy sector. I think just in general the extractive sector in as it is. So transparency and access to information and Graham, accountability, as you would, fosters investor confidence. Point. We know that. So we know that if there's information readily available, we will be able to easily attract investors to the country, and it also mitigates risks. Why? Because when you know exactly what you're getting yourself into, it sort of helps in planning long term, right? But I think we are at a time in the world. I think also in Africa right now, where the transparency and all the benefits is not just focusing on the investor. Now it's for the, and I want to be brave enough to say, for the first time in ever history, people are saying we want access to information as well. We want to know how we're benefiting. We want to know if we bring in an investor, who is that investor? Do you understand? It's great to have money, thank you, but what am I getting out of it? I mean, the clip you played earlier just now is a very good example of that kind of sort of symbiotic relationship that we are after. So to answer your question, to have transparency, it brings you allowed, it gives you enough time to plan long term. But what I want to emphasize on is that transparency efforts is not enough. You need more than that in a country or in an environment. You need and I wrote this down because I don't want to get it wrong. Transparency is not necessary, but it is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We need a broader governance structure to accompany transparency. That makes then the country or the environment in which the money goes into much more attractive. To say, okay, we've got a transparent environment, but is that enough? What else accompanies that? And I'll park there for now, and we'll come back to that later.
Thanks for that, Senzi. And Eline, I'd like to go back to you on that particular point as well. Just the importance of having that governance structure, right, around the issues of transparency. And perhaps that speaks more directly to policy and to development, right? A detailed roadmap
of what is actually happening on the ground. Just from your point of view, in terms of structuring policy, in terms of structuring development, how important is that for, number one, the people to understand, and number two, do you see that happening in this situation?
I don't know. Oh, it's on. Yeah. Thank you for having me here. It's really wonderful that this initiative has started, because it will also help us at the Green Hydrogen Program to get the word out. So people are often saying, there is no policy for green hydrogen. How can we start this sector without a policy? What are they hiding? What is happening? And I beg to disagree with that sentiment. So we started a new sector. When a new sector is emerging, you typically do not have all your ducks in a row. When telecommunications started in Namibia, we just had a telephone with a little dial pad. We didn't have mobile communication. The legislation around mobile communication came later. So it is not always immediately at the start that you have all the aspects that you can actually capture all the aspects. So we started with a strategy in 2022, the Green Hydrogen and Derivatives Strategy, publicly available on the website, everywhere. It was printed, I believe. Then in 2024, we followed with a Green Industrialization Blueprint to show how can we use this resource, this green hydrogen, to energize industries in Namibia. How can we make more complex products in Namibia? How can we stop the export of raw materials, our minerals, without any value addition? So that GIB was also put on our website, well socialized, it was workshopped, it was really shared with as many people as possible. So it's not that we are shrouded in secrecy at the Green Hydrogen Program, otherwise I wouldn't be working there. That wouldn't be my cup of tea either. And we are now working towards a green hydrogen policy, bringing the different elements together. And the idea is to go out to all the regions as per the instructions of the National Planning Commission for Policy Development. There are certain rules. You can't just put a policy together and say, here's the policy, let Cabinet approve it, and off we go towards legislation. So for us at the Green Hydrogen Program, not only this particular CSO grant that was given out by the EU, but also the other two, to NNF and to NDT and IRDNC, are very helpful so that we can have a more informed discussion about these policies. You guys will have to help us, because even when we started, I started a year ago at the Green Hydrogen Program, I was thrown in the deep end of the pool. There is not a lot of expertise in this country on green hydrogen. I had to read up, I had to understand what all these terms were that we're using in the industry. What is the levelized cost of energy? How is green hydrogen even made? I had no cooking clue. I had to prepare for my interview and I started reading up. So we are very open to learning together. We know that we need to do better. I've said it at various fora before. Graham can attest to that a couple of months ago. We have to do better, but we are a very small team, and we are focusing on de-risking in the sector, not only from an information perspective and a transparency perspective. We're looking at technical issues, we're looking at financial issues, we're looking at de-risking from an environmental perspective. So we have a lot on our plate, and it's really wonderful that we can now hopefully reach more people through these initiatives so that we can get the word out more clearly. And I'd like to just briefly touch on the hot potato that's always being mentioned. That's the feasibility implementation agreement. between Hyphen Hydrogen Energy and the government of Namibia. It's a commercial agreement. There's a lot of intellectual property that went into that agreement. I do understand that maybe the summary is not enough, but then let us know what more you would like to know. How can we do better there? We have given out the key details around the social and economic development framework. How many jobs do we anticipate? How much local content? How many Namibians do we anticipate to participate in the construction and the operational phase, etc., etc. There's something on corporate social investment in there. There is something about how we can help Luderitz and Aus to participate in that particular project. So, yeah, it is also sometimes that we need a bit of help from you to figure out what more we need to share with the wider community.
Perhaps at that point, Peter, I'd like to bring you in here on how generally journalists and the media can level on their positions with the freedom of expression that they are entitled to unlock and crack open that limited information or lack of information that they're talking about. And again, like I mentioned in this term, the limited information. We hear here there is information. On the other side, there is limited information, or perhaps not even the right information. How can journalists then leverage on their position of freedom of expression in that regard?
Yeah, John Colin, thank you for having me, and good evening to everybody. I cannot judge now about this green hydrogen project here in Namibia. I just arrived this morning from Germany, and at least I brought some rain, but I don't have a solution with me. So the only thing which I think is absolutely vital in these kind of questions is that the public is well informed. It's not a revolutionary thing, but it is vital. And how can this be done? And I think, first of all, you've mentioned that there has to be transparency. That means that the government has to get out with the information when asked. And there has to be also freedom of press. So these are the vital keys to step further. And the next thing, which is also crucial, is you need informed and educated journalists. The problem starts often when there are journalists in the field who have no clue at all, who are activists and who are not journalists. And we try to tell our people, whatever good cause you are thinking of, you are journalists, that's the first thing. And then listen to all the parts and then make your own picture. But make it on facts, make it on reliable facts, and make it on scientific research and not on prejudice or whatever. So I think it's a both way. You have to have the government accountable, but you have to also have our profession accountable, the journalists. And this is why I like what we are here for today, that we have this project, that we try to help journalists here in Namibia, and hopefully also in other places, to be better when they address these topics, which are highly complicated. We all said, we don't really know, well, how is this going? Miracles happening with this green hydrogen thing. But on the other hand, we have to dig deep into it, and we have to see what are the consequences for the people. And not who's right from you or the other side, but what are the consequences for the people? And there can be wonderful consequences, but there can be also devastating consequences when you live there and when your environment is getting polluted, however it is, happens. But it has to be all on the table, and then the people have to judge whether they like it or not. So this is my 5 cents there.
Thanks, Peter. And Suzie, I want you to, just off the back of what Peter is saying, the existing information there is generally on projects, or project data rather, in the space, in the green and in the energy space. How can that information help to empower Namibians at large, but perhaps specifically young people, to feel more included in this particular arena? That's been the argument, that Namibians feel that they're not included. Namibians feel that they don't know. How can that data then assist them in that regard? Can we have a mic for her, please?
Okay. I think the first thing that young people are obviously thinking about is employment, right? We all want a job. The unemployment statistics are quite scary for young people. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is using the available information to, one, encourage entrepreneurship. Especially now, as we see with the local content policy for oil and gas, there are opportunities for young people to, one, make an impact, and two, benefit from the existing emerging industry. But they need access to that information, right? And they need also to understand that information, because you can publish a local content policy, but like, what does it really mean in context, right? And what can you do with that information? So I think the first way young people can benefit from that is if we take existing policies and we take existing opportunities and we shine a light on them. We shine a light on them to say, where can you fit within the value chain? You know, do you need to be an engineer, or can you start a particular business? But then again, access to information is not enough for entrepreneurship. We know this. We have issues in Namibia with access to financing for SMEs. So for me, I also feel like it is a kind of a collective effort, right? Bringing different stakeholders together to utilize that information to make opportunities for young people. Secondly, I think with the information that is out there, I do want to say that, again, I always feel like I say it's not enough, but it's also not enough. What we've seen in media houses is a duplication of press statements, right? And then the press statements are repurposed as articles, and that can also be very problematic because then you have access to information, but you have access to a very curated set of information. And I think that's why platforms like these and projects like these are also so important, so that we can produce high quality journalism, high quality pieces that actually reflect the reality of what's happening in the ground. Because people are empowered by the truth. They are not empowered by beautiful stories that invoke emotions. And then thirdly, I could say that the information that is out there is also important so that young people can know the gaps that exist. The gaps that exist in policy, the gaps that exist in practice, and it can allow young people to then lobby and go out there and advocate for the policymakers and for private industry and for civil society to help fill in those gaps, because it is within the gaps that the missed opportunities exist. And so access to information is also important in that regard, so you can know what the current landscape is and how we can change it to benefit the people.
Tangeni, on that point, there's been various talks on the knowledge of journalists as they disseminate this information. We have heard talks of, sure, there is knowledge there, or there is information there, but it's curated information or limited information. How are you dealing with that challenge at the Namibian, and I guess generally as a media in the country that has to really give out this critical information in this critical sector that people are hungry for, but sometimes some say that journalists are unequipped for that?
Well, there's a lot of truth in that statement, journalists not being equipped for that. I would say we have to appreciate that you can only be as good as how well trained and how well informed you are. At the Namibian, when we started getting this big buzz about green hydrogen, oil exploration, a couple of years ago, we've tried to approach several institutions, and others also approached us to beef up our knowledge, to beef up our reporting. And I would say it will never be enough. And therefore, initiatives like the one we are discussing today are crucial. We published something as basic as what is green hydrogen? What is this green hydrogen all about? It might seem like it's too basic maybe for Eline, but this is what a government, for instance, should help society get. And it should go around to different parts of the community, libraries, basic schools, community centers, just to understand what is this green hydrogen all about. Otherwise, you will have a lot of communities complaining, either because they don't understand, or suddenly in Daures, which is a dry part of Namibia, farmers will be competing with this new industry that requires a lot of water. Just basic. They've been struggling to get water for ages. Suddenly we hear, there's going to be a green hydrogen production plant, but it requires a lot of water. So, these guys can actually make water available for industry, but we've been struggling all these years just to keep our livestock going, our basic domestic livestock going. So how will then you expect communities to up and support this foreign concept when it's more supported than their basic livelihood? So we are trying to get our journalists to be informed. In fact, we even set up on our website, we have what we call the Energy Center, through which information like this and news stories are published. So it's a go-to place for those who are more interested in energy, whether it's oil, gas, or green hydrogen and other related projects.
Senzi, I'll come to you on that as well, because if you look at our neighbors in Botswana, there seems to be reported clear governance structures in the space of minerals and in the space of energy. And that has gotten a lot of public trust, right? But that also fell on the responsibility or on the shoulders of the business sector itself, which took it upon itself to equally inform the communities as well as government. What can we learn in that regard to replicate the same, so we don't deal with questions like the ones we're dealing on the table?
CJ, before I get to that question, I allow me to just digress, but to the point.
Briefly.
So, very briefly. So, my learned colleague next to me, the green hydrogen industry is not necessarily brand new. It comes down to basics. And the basics being, we are dealing with an extractive industry. And so what I'm getting there, I know you're saying no, but give me a second. What I'm trying to get there is the policies that are existing. So there are existing policies that talks to energy and mining, okay? So what we want to really get at is, from what you have there, how do we build onto it? Do you understand? And the basic thereof is land use, environmental impact, and local benefit sharing. And so the secrecy that is shrouding the topic is not necessarily, what is green hydrogen bringing us? We want to know, what is the impact that green hydrogen will do? And the clip you showed is a very classic example, and Tangeni just said, we want to know, you chose Daures as your area of, The village is doing what? It's for research, yeah, one of them. You just mentioned now how you want to improve Ludrats and etc. But the point is, those are the three fundamental things that the project should actually be touching on. But back to your question. Botswana, the Botswana, I'm so distracted here, but I'll try and answer. It's really built on 3 pillars: strong institutions, transparent revenue management, and a clear national benefit sharing strategy. So that's what it is really, and we can learn a lot from it as Namibia. You know, we want to know if a sector, because at the end of the day, the Constitutional Act says that the minerals belong to us. So when it's extracted and it's mined, etc., how do we benefit? So we want to know if a mine has reported these profits, where is that revenue being spent on, right? So in the past, we would say, I touched on that briefly with you, CJ, that you can see, for example, schools have been built, but are there schools still being built from revenue from the mining industry? Then I guess the follow-up question that will be, is that the responsibility of the mining industry to build schools, etc., the infrastructure that's existing? Local value addition, what Botswana then did is that they say, okay, fine, the diamonds come from us, but we now want to, the value addition, so we want to bring the value addition from Botswana so that there are more jobs created from the diamond industry. So you saw that they created more jobs, okay? And the public trust in consistent engagement, because there was regular reporting on what's happening with the money that coming from the diamond sector. Of course, I'm using the diamond sector specifically as an example, but there's much more to. But again, it comes under the 3 pillars: public reporting on revenue, local value addition, and public trust through consistent engagement.
So, Eline, I want to go to you, and just on perhaps the foundation that everyone has laid, including yourself, and on that issue of public trust, what is the strategy in enhancing public trust with the current situation, where you say that there is information out there, you need assistance in order to make it a bit more reachable and maybe pragmatic for everyone? You can't hear me. Is this better? There we go. What is the strategy to enhance public trust in the current context that you find yourself, with the various positions that many Namibians have from the business sector, from media, from civil society?
Okay, I'm going to first talk about my immediate space at the program. So I'm responsible for ESG. We have been talking about a strategic environmental and social impact assessment, a SESA, for the longest time. Very unfortunate, we have been missing 2 international open procurements. We could not find a successful bidder, but now finally we have started. We had a kick-off meeting this week with the service provider who's going to really go deep into what are the values that Namibians attach to biodiversity and environmental protection. This is now for the Southern Valley. The SCDI, as we call it, the Southern Corridor Development Initiative, including the Tsautrai Park. And what are the values and the attributes that we collectively believe are important for socio-economic development, improving people's livelihoods, making sure that there are jobs and business opportunities for Namibians. So it's that whole balancing act between how to use the land and how to make sure that we do that in a sustainable and careful manner. So finally that is kicking off. The SESA for the Central Valley, where you find Daurus, where you find high iron, where clean energy is operating, where HDF is setting up and where Zero is setting up. That one is on tender at the moment. We've gone through the expression of interest, and we hope in the next month or 2 to have a contractor. And the SESA is not just a study. The whole idea is that it's a consultative framework, very well organized, whereby we consult policymakers, business, communities, traditional authorities, whoever is in that space that needs to be consulted, to hear how they look at the use of the land, because there are many ways that we can use the land, and you may call it an extractive industry. I mean, I think the jury is still out on that in terms of green hydrogen, but in the Zoutkai Park we have mining, we have exploration, we have tourism, we have 2 renewable energy projects on the go already with 2 wind parks. Nampower is eyeing a large wind park in the park. The Oranjemund municipality is looking at a wind energy facility as well. There's a lot of competing and maybe conflicting interest in the land. When you talked about dowries, that may seem like a contradiction. Here we are in the middle of a desert, and dowries wants to start creating green hydrogen and green ammonia from water, very scarce water. So one of the principles that we have set in the policy is that fresh water should not be your first go-to in the green hydrogen space. We're looking at desalinated water. Dowers cannot extract out of that aquifer unlimited amounts of water, even though they're downstream from Oise, as far as I understand, but my colleague is going there next week to really understand where the water is coming from for dowers. But these are conflicting interest between farmers, between the community, the traditional authority, the miners in Oise, and we need to do collectively as government, but also as civil society, a much better job in balancing those different interests. So from a governance point of view, this is what we hope to set out. The last CESA for the Northern Valley, sorry, my glasses are falling off. For the Northern Valley, we'll focus on critical raw materials that are required for the green energy transition. So that will be the focus of that CESA. The focus of the CESA in the central region will be more on common user infrastructure, making sure that the various smaller green hydrogen projects will use common infrastructure for water, for hydrogen, ammonia, power lines, possibly rail for the high iron, direct reduced iron pellets. So yeah, we are trying to break it open, and I'm very happy that we can finally start. In terms of access to our offers, what I find sometimes quite disappointing, because we have quite an open door policy at our office. Sometimes journalists don't even bother to call us and say, well, I have found this, this is my conclusion, what is your view? We don't get asked, and we are there. We have a telephone number, we have a website, we are reachable. So also reach out to us when you're not sure, from a technical perspective or financial perspective. It's a complicated setup. We have, a lot of different elements in the green hydrogen space. So this is kind of an open invitation. Please come and talk to us when you are uncertain. Ask for information. We have a lot of information. Maybe you didn't know it was here or there. We are very happy to help educate journalists to do a better job.
On that point, Peter, of education, if journalists feel that they can't get information directly from the source, how do they navigate around in order, like you said, explain to people with facts and with information that is understandable to them? Where do they go afterwards?
Well, if there is a situation where a company or a ministry or whatever is hiding information or is blocking them or is not giving it away, then fortunately we have investigative journalists who are concentrated on data mining, who are concentrated on getting people to speak about what's really happening. I'm not quite sure whether we have the case here now. I think we have a company which at least says we're open, so okay, one should try it. and then value with scientists and other people what is coming out of the company. So first of all, because sometimes also journalists, they don't call you because they don't want to kill the story. So not our journalists, basically, and not nobody here in this room, but some of them might do this sometimes. So, and I'm always here to advocate for press freedom, for journalism, but for good journalism, and not for the few we have also in this branch which are not working properly. So, basically, there are means to get information. But one should always try to start with and make it fair and balanced. And if you see it doesn't work and then somebody's hiding, then put up the next gear.
All right, we are slowly going to start concluding our discussion. Suzie, I'll start with you, and perhaps the same question for everyone in your respective spaces. How do we highlight the issue of transparency in the context that we are in right now, but also how do we get to actually be transparent from civil society's point of view, from the media, from the policy directors, from business, with the current challenges we have? It seems that we still haven't gotten to a solution. If you can just pass to the mic there again. That's fine. The gentleman you are.
I think that from a civil society perspective, our mandate is to empower, I don't like the word empower, is to help local communities realize the power that they have in their hands, right? Earlier, Tony had spoken about free and prior informed consent, which is an internationally enshrined right that local communities have to be consulted and to give consent in extractive industries. A lot of people don't know about that, you know. And so I think for civil society, our role is to go into the communities and to let people know that, hey, you actually have this power, and then have communities empower themselves by leveraging that knowledge, right? Secondly, moving from here onwards, again, I would encourage civil society to empower the Namibian government to fully assent to the EITI. It's very important in terms of transparency. It's what gets us from where we are now to a future where we know what is happening in the background. And then I think finally, within ourselves, right, the quality of the intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. So us ourselves as civil society should also foster a culture of transparency. Where are you getting your money from? You know, what are you using it for? What public activities have you done? It's something where you start from yourself, you can emanate it outwards. And I think that's also really important and something that we don't talk about a lot. You know, what conditions do we have and how does it reflect what we want to see out there? And for me, that's those three things.
Tangeni, how do we get to actual transparency with the context of journalists wanting to get information, Eline saying that there's an open door policy. There sometimes is a situation where journalists don't come ask for information, even if it's technical, on a technical approach. How do we get to transparency with that context?
I guess we again need to encourage their hunger and curiosity to know what is happening around us. And if we don't do that, you will always have people taking shortcuts. We will always have, especially in a society that has cultivated political and economic patronage, where only those who are in the know can apply for fishing quotas or fishing rights and mining licenses. They have EPLs because they know their way around the corridors of power. As long as this information on how society is sharing in the resources of their country is not available, we will always have problems. Access to information is not for journalists, it's for the public. We need an information commission that is not pliable or pliant to the powers that be. The Anti-Corruption Commission should not have people leading it who feel their allegiance are to the people who are in power rather than to protect the resources of the community. So we just have to work among ourselves and with the government. By the way, getting the access to information law was work that was pushed for years. I think the LAC and the Namibian, since before independence, were pushing for society to have certain rights, basic rights, and among those basic rights is access to information or having access to basic resources like water, like legal advice. So encouraging, I think, especially for us who are at that nexus of informing the public, we should first be the ones who are informed, who are well trained. And if we are not, we will struggle to create that hunger and curiosity for people to know what is being done with their power. I think people think voting is a popularity contest, when it's not about whether Deutsche won and the rest lost. We end up celebrating the win rather than realizing that once we have put someone in power, we now need to get them to deliver what we need, or the services that are needed. It's really not right that income disparity has gotten worse, or unemployment has gotten worse in Namibia. More than 1 million people are food insecure, meaning they just don't know where to get their next meal. In a country of 3 million people, with a so-called GDP that puts us at middle income status, it's just unforgivable. That speaks to poor sharing of resources, and the public needs to be taught to demand that those resources are shared at least equitably, or at least for the most vulnerable to have the basic access.
All right. Senzi, on the business front, where are we in terms of getting to transparency? How do we get to transparency again, with the context that we have?
Yeah, I think we as a country stand at a very unique opportunity to shape our energy future through transparency, or using a transparency first approach that benefits both business and society. But we just have to be careful in rather using transparency as a tool, not the end goal. And I'll try and elaborate. So we should not just be reporting numbers, but we have to ensure that transparency leads to accountability, that it leads to inclusion and shared benefits. Then our energy transition will be a success story for Africa. So let's look beyond numbers. Suzie, you talk about EITI. EITI has a great framework. It's a great tool, but it doesn't really talk to. It often fails to address the underlying power structures. So how do we? And that's what I've been advocating for. So if we bring EITI here, which I think is a fantastic tool, and nothing wrong with it, but how do we customize it to Namibia to address the underlying power structures? And if we could put all of that together, I think we're on the right track.
Thank you. Eline, from your side, I'm sure there's a lot to think about now with the given realities of everyone's spaces. How do we get to transparency?
I think I would plead with the media, journalists, those who are advocating for communities, to also remove a little bit of the suspicion. There is so much suspicion around. I don't know where that came from. Mistrust, to kind of really work on the mistrust, because I think often the conclusion is already there, and then, if you write your article with your conclusion in mind before you have even spoken to anybody, before you've done any research, before you have really applied your mind, that is dangerous. I've recently seen some articles in a socio-economic journal, and I'm sitting there crunching, looking at facts that are completely wrong, have not been tested with the company that the particular case study was all about. And that worries me. And I don't know what we may have done in the green hydrogen sector, that we have created this mistrust, but can we please figure out a way so that we can better communicate with each other? I'd love to sit with Tangeni, with Suzie, with yourselves, and let's map out where did we go wrong, because it can't be that this is a new sector for Namibia. We have, as you say, 50% broad unemployment. If you take the narrow definition, the government definition, it's maybe 30%, but we're sitting with a broad employment unemployment of 50%. Among the youth, how many people come out of universities, out of schools, out of vocational training centers, and they don't find a job. We gotta do better. We gotta make this sector work. We don't have the luxury in Namibia to just criticize a new emerging sector into the ground so that we are not gonna have a green hydrogen sector. What would be worse? Yeah, we are trying to create jobs. We are trying to do things environmentally sustainable. We are trying to be as transparent as possible. It's not out of unwill from the side of the green hydrogen program that this misconception of what is it? Suspicion, mistrust, already concluding there must be corruption in the green hydrogen program or in the green hydrogen space. That makes me a little bit sad, because that is not what we're all about. And we really, really plead with you to come to us. Let's meet. We've taken journalists. We took 20 journalists to the South Park last year in October. They were part of the Literate Stakeholders Conference. We had question and answer sessions with them. We have a Q&A on our website. Let us know which instruments work the best for you in order for us to release the information. It is sometimes complicated documents. It's thick documents. It's maybe not in the best language for the general populace, that I agree with. And that's why these little pamphlets are very useful. But help us to do a better job. That's basically my ask this evening.
Peter, you've, like you said, landed in Namibia today, and perhaps this conversation has given you a little bit of the lay of the land. But on a wider perspective, how, obviously the ending question is how do we get to transparency, but just looking at what DW does, for instance, when we look at emerging industries, if you are struggling to get that right story, you go through other measures, look at documentaries, look at various general other public service questions that you can get out there. With that context in mind, and with this context here as well, how do we get to transparency?
I mean, I think there is maybe one reason why this mistrust is in the room is that if you look back at what's happening or happened in Africa with energy and how the wealth has been distributed among the populations, I mean, there might be a reason why people start to think, or how mining affected every society, and how mining made only a few people very rich, and the rest just looks the big cars and the rich people driving through the town. So I think this has been all over Africa and all over the world. It's not only an African problem, it's also a problem which you have in Ukraine, in Russia. So all about energy is very affected by corruption. So, and I think if you see this, maybe a new form of energy has the problem that it's going to be also thrown into this basket. But then it's a question of, well, everybody to look very closely. Is it the same pattern? Is it the same thing, or is it? Where are the differences? Maybe is this green hydrogen maybe working differently from what happened to oil, gas, or whatever? So I think I cannot give you an answer. Say we at DW we know it all. No, we try to look at these topics and look at maybe the whole continent a bit more than only one country. So that's what we do, and the contribution I'd like to remember to finalize before we get back to our friend Carsten is that we have this project now, and I think this project can really make a difference. That people find out whether it's a difference to other patterns, or maybe that we are in a new area where people really feel that they have the power and to control. So let's see how it works.
Thank you so much to all of you on this panel. And the point of this wasn't really to point fingers, but really to understand what the situation on the ground is. The obvious gaps, the obvious misunderstandings, and there are solutions that are being put on the table. The question is, will that happen? Is that happening? And do we have the tools to make that happen? This project we're launching today chooses to do exactly that. And it is up to not only all of you as leaders in your industries, but up to you as well, with the context you got here today, to then ask those questions, to go there and get that information and disseminate that information and get transparency there. Let's hope we get there as Namibians. It's incumbent upon you. Thank you very much, Suzie, Tangeni, Senzi, Eline, and Peter. A round of applause for them, please. To give us our closing remarks and a vote of thanks, I would like to welcome Carsten von Namen, the Managing Director of the DW Academy. Thank you. Round of applause for him.
Thank you very much. Great panel, very interesting insights. At the beginning, John Collin asked the question, at the end of this evening, will we be more informed or more confused? I hope, but at least I think we got some information, we got a better picture about where the problems lie. And I think we even got a few aspects of possible solutions, things that stuck out for me. Takeaways were clearly access to information, that has been mentioned several times. Transparency, and in particular transparency about impacts for communities, but also for the country as a whole. What we need is, not only here in Namibia, everywhere, curious, serious, and well-trained journalists who actually make the effort to get the information, if there is access to information. And all that we need to have a more informed discussion in society, a constructive dialogue in society. I think that's important, not people just pointing fingers, as has been said, not just shouting at each other, but actually trying to understand the other side, trying to come together to these solutions. And I think, of course, this panel discussion this evening here was not for giving all those solutions, but actually starting a process in which we all can find it. I'm now in the very unfortunate position that I'm standing between you and drinks and food, but nevertheless, I would like to thank all the people and institutions that made this evening and also this whole project possible. So, first of all, the EU delegation, represented by Ian Dupont, for supporting media and civil society in Namibia to be informed, critical and constructive voices on Namibia's path to becoming an energy provider. I'd also like to thank the German embassy, represented by Ambassador Dr. Thorsten Hutter, for being a champion of free expression, free media and journalistic excellence. And by the way, Ambassador Hutter has opened doors for DW Akademie, not only here in Namibia, but also in Zimbabwe, where he was posted before, so thank you for that. I'd like to thank all the Eco Dialogue Collective Consortium partners, so the NMT Media Foundation and Zoe Titus, IPPR and Graham Hopwood, LAC and Tony Hancocks. I'd like to thank the teams of IPPR, the NMT, LSC and DW Akademie for the dedicated preparation for this event, the experts on the panel that we've just seen, our presenter, moderator, John Colin Namare, the Welle Life Arts Collective with their very impressive, I will never forget that fish, presentation, but also, and I could see that they were really touching a nerve on especially that young minister's son, so apparently there was some truth in that performance. I'd like to thank the team of the Village Garden for hosting our event, all the Namibian partners of DW Akademie, the Academy team here in Windhoek, led by Peter Deselars. There's also Izette Ferris, Nora Theiser, and Hagen Schubert. And the media, of course, for covering this event. And last but not least, all of you for coming here, for taking the time, for listening. And I wish you all now more constructive dialogue with some food and some drinks outside. Thank you very much. I'm closing this event here, but we're starting this project. Thank you all. Bye-bye.